The fluorescent lights hummed above the polished floors of Alimentari di Lusso, Naples' most exclusive grocery store. It was nearly midnight. The aisles gleamed with imported champagne, truffle oils, and blood oranges arranged like jewels. Most customers had fled hours ago. But she was still there. A ghost in an oversized coat. Her fingers trembled as she reached for a single apple. She never saw him watching from the shadows. Lucian Moretti stood motionless near the wine cellar, his black wolf tattoo visible beneath his cuff as he lifted a glass of aged Barolo. His men flanked him silently. The entire store had been cleared for his private visit. Except for her. She shouldn't have been there. But she was. And when her body crumpled, knees buckling, fruit scattering across marble like fallen stars, everyone froze. Everyone except him. He moved like smoke. Caught her before she hit the ground. And something fell from her coat pocket. Not a wallet. Not keys. A child's drawing. Crayon scribbles of a black wolf. And a name written in a dead woman's handwriting. Lucian's blood turned to ice. He knew that name. He had buried it 5 years ago. Please like, share, and subscribe. Part 1. The Fall. Chapter 1. The Girl Who Shouldn't Exist. She weighed nothing. That was Lucian's first thought as he held her. This stranger who had somehow slipped past his security, who had collapsed in his arms like a broken bird. Her face was pale. Almost translucent. Dark circles carved hollows beneath her closed eyes, and her lips were colorless, cracked from dehydration. She was starving. He could feel it in the sharpness of her bones, the way her coat hung loose on her frame, the desperate thinness of her wrists. "Boss." Marco stepped forward, hand reaching for his weapon. "Should we?" "Don't touch her." The words came out quiet. Deadly. Marco retreated immediately. Lucian looked down at the woman in his arms. She couldn't have been more than 23, 24. Young enough to be naive. Old enough to know better than to be here. Yet here she was. In his store. At midnight. Unconscious. He shifted her weight, and more items tumbled from her pockets. A bottle of prescription medication, nearly empty. A bus pass with no remaining balance. And that drawing. That impossible drawing. Lucian's jaw tightened as he stared at it. A child had drawn a black wolf with yellow eyes. Beneath it, in handwriting he would recognize anywhere, were the words, "Il lupo ti proteggerà." The wolf will protect you. His chest constricted. Valentina. Valentina Marchetti had written those words. But Valentina Marchetti had been dead for 5 years. Murdered. And he had been the one to find her body. 15 minutes later. The private medical suite in Lucian's estate hummed with quiet efficiency. Dr. Falcone, a silver-haired man who had been treating Moretti family injuries for 30 years, worked silently over the unconscious woman. Lucian stood in the doorway, watching. "Severe malnutrition," Falcone murmured, checking her for. "Dehydration. Exhaustion. When was the last time this woman ate a proper meal?" "I don't know. She's been running on empty for weeks. Maybe months." The doctor shook his head. "Her body simply gave out." Lucian said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on her face. Even unconscious, there was something about her, a stubborn set to her jaw, a tension in her brow, that suggested she had been fighting something long before tonight. "The medication," Lucian said quietly. "What is it?" Falcone examined the bottle. "Anti-anxiety. Prescribed to—" He paused. Frowned. "The name on this bottle isn't hers." "How do you know?" "Because the prescription is for a child. Aged 6. Silence filled the room. A child. She was carrying a child's medication. But there was no child with her. Where was the child? Across Naples. In a rusted car parked behind an abandoned warehouse, a little girl sat alone in the back seat. She clutched a stuffed rabbit to her chest. Her eyes, large and dark and far too old for her age, stared at the door. Waiting. Elena had told her to wait. Elena always came back. But tonight felt different. The shadows felt longer. The silence felt heavier. Sophia pulled the rabbit closer and pressed her face against the window. She didn't speak. She hadn't spoken in 2 years. Not since the night she watched her real mother die. Chapter 2. The Woman Without a Name. She woke screaming. Not a scream of fear, but of panic. Pure, unfiltered terror. Sophia! Elena lurched upright, ripping the four from her arm, blood spattering across white sheets. She stumbled off the bed, legs giving out beneath her, crashing to the marble floor. She crawled toward the door. Had to get back. Had to get to Sophia. How long had she been unconscious? Hours? Days? Sophia was alone. Sophia was always alone when Elena failed. Hands caught her shoulders. Strong hands. Unfamiliar hands. Stop. The voice was quiet. Commanding. Elena froze. She looked up and felt her blood turn cold. She knew that face. Everyone in Naples knew that face. Lucian Moretti. Il Lupo Nero. The Black Wolf. The most powerful and dangerous man in southern Italy. And she was in his house. In his grip. With his eyes, dark as obsidian, cold as winter marble, fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to disappear. Who is Sophia? Elena's heart stopped. She said nothing. You screamed the name. Lucian's grip on her shoulders didn't tighten, but it didn't release either. Sophia. Who is she? No one. You're lying. I'm not. The medication in your pocket. His voice remained soft. Terrifyingly soft. It's prescribed for a 6-year-old child. Where is she? Elena's mind raced. She couldn't tell him. She couldn't tell anyone. Sophia's life depended on silence. I don't know what you're talking about. Lucian studied her face for a long moment. Then he released her. Stood. Smoothed his suit jacket. The black wolf tattoo on his wrist caught the light as he moved. Dark ink against tan skin, predatory and permanent. You collapsed in my store, he said calmly. You were carrying a drawing made by a child. The handwriting on that drawing belongs to a woman who died 5 years ago. He paused. You're going to tell me the truth. Tonight. Or I will find it myself. He walked toward the door. Stopped. And trust me, Miss Rossi. Elena's blood chilled. He knew her name. How did he know her name? You don't want me to find the truth myself. 2 hours later. Elena refused to speak. Refused to eat. Refused to acknowledge the guard stationed outside her door. But her mind was screaming. Sophia had been alone for, she calculated frantically, at least 4 hours now. 4 hours in a cold car. 4 hours without food, water, or anyone to protect her. Elena pressed her palms to her eyes and tried to breathe. She couldn't fall apart. Not now. Not ever. Sophia needed her. Sophia had needed her since the night Valentina died in her arms, bleeding out on a warehouse floor, pressing a terrified 4-year-old into Elena's hands and whispering, "Take her. Hide her. They're coming for her. They're coming for what she knows." Elena had been 19 then. A medical student with a bright future. A normal life. But she had taken Sophia. Run. And never stopped running. Across the estate. Lucian stood in his private study, staring at the child's drawing. The black wolf stared back at him. Yellow eyes. Sharp teeth. But the wolf wasn't attacking. It was guarding something. A small figure. A little girl with dark hair and no mouth. Lucian's grip on the paper tightened. Valentina Marchetti had been his informant. 5 years ago, she had come to him with information, evidence of something massive, something that could bring down not just his enemies, but powerful men in the government itself. Before she could deliver that evidence, she had been murdered. Her body found in a warehouse. No witnesses. No evidence. No child. But there had been rumors. Whispers. Valentina had a daughter. A daughter who vanished the same night her mother died. A daughter who, according to every official record, did not exist. Lucian set the drawing down. Looked at the surveillance feed on his monitor. Elena Rossi sat on the edge of the hospital bed, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the door. Waiting. Planning. She was going to run. He could see it in the tension of her shoulders, the calculations behind her eyes. She was going to try to escape and return to whoever she had left behind. Lucian pressed a button on his desk. Marco. Boss. Find Elena Rossi's car. It's registered under a false name, probably within a 5-mile radius of the grocery store. Abandoned or parked somewhere hidden. What am I looking for? Lucian's eyes never left the screen. A child. Chapter 3. The Girl Who Doesn't Speak. Marco found the car at 3:47 a.m. It was parked behind an abandoned textile factory, rusted, dented, with blankets covering the windows. Inside, curled in the back seat like a wounded animal, was a little girl. She didn't scream when the door opened. Didn't cry. Didn't move. She simply looked up at Marco with eyes that had seen too much, clutching a stuffed rabbit so tightly her knuckles were white. "Hey," Marco said softly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl said nothing. She pressed herself against the far door, making herself as small as possible. Marco's chest tightened. He had seen a lot of terrible things in his years serving the Moretti family. But something about this child, this silent, terrified child, broke something inside him. He pulled out his phone. "Boss. I found her." 30 minutes later. Elena heard the car doors. The footsteps. The quiet murmur of voices. And then, the door to her room opened. Lucian walked in. Behind him, carried gently in Marco's arms, was Sophia. Elena's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, a sob tearing from her throat, raw and desperate and utterly uncontrolled. "Sophia!" The little girl's eyes found Elena. For the first time in hours, something shifted in that small, haunted face. Recognition. Relief. Safety. Sophia reached for her. Marco set her down, and she ran across the marble floor on bare feet, throwing herself into Elena's arms with a force that nearly knocked them both over. Elena held her tight, tighter than she had ever held anything. "I'm sorry," she whispered into Sophia's hair. "I'm so sorry. I'm here. I'm here." Sophia said nothing. She never said anything. But her small hands fisted in Elena's shirt, and she buried her face in Elena's chest, and for that moment, that single fragile moment, they were both safe. Lucian watched from the doorway. His face revealed nothing. But his hands, hidden in his pockets, were trembling. Later that night, Elena sat on the hospital bed with Sophia curled in her lap. The child was asleep, exhausted from fear and relief and the simple trauma of existing. Lucian sat across from them in a leather chair, waiting. "You want answers," Elena said quietly. "Yes. And if I don't give them, then I will find them anyway." His voice was calm. "But it will take longer. And in that time, whoever is looking for this child may find her first." Elena's arms tightened around Sophia. "How do you know someone is looking for her?" Because Valentina Marchetti died protecting something. Lucian's dark eyes never wavered, and the people who killed her never found what they were looking for. The name hung in the air like smoke. Elena's face drained of color. You knew her. She was mine. The word sent a chill down Elena's spine. Yours. My informant. My responsibility. Something flickered in his eyes. Grief, perhaps. Or guilt. She came to me 5 years ago with evidence of a conspiracy. Powerful men. Government officials. Before she could deliver it, she was murdered. He leaned forward. Tell me, Miss Rossi, how does a 19-year-old medical student end up with a dead informant's child? Elena closed her eyes. The memories came flooding back. Blood on concrete. Valentina's hands, cold and trembling, pressing Sophia into her arms. Take her. Hide her. They're coming. She found me, Elena whispered. I was working a night shift at a free clinic in the Quartiere Spagnoli. She stumbled in, bleeding. Said she'd been shot. I tried to help her, but... Her voice broke. She died in my arms. And before she died, she gave me Sophia. Told me to run. Told me they would kill us both if they found us. Who? I don't know. You've been running for 5 years and you don't know who's hunting you? She didn't tell me. Elena's eyes opened, blazing with sudden fury. She was dying. She had seconds. All she said was that Sophia had seen something, knew something, and that they would never stop looking for her. Silence. Lucian's gaze shifted to the sleeping child. Sophia's face was peaceful now, soft with sleep, the lines of fear temporarily erased. But even in sleep, she clutched her rabbit with desperate strength. What did she see? Lucian asked quietly. I don't know. She's never told you? She doesn't speak. Elena's voice cracked. She hasn't said a single word since the night her mother died. Chapter 4. The Wolf and the Lamb. The next morning, Lucian made a decision. It was not a strategic decision. It was not a logical decision. It was, in fact, the most irrational decision he had made in 20 years of running a criminal empire. He walked into Elena's room and said, You're staying here. Elena looked up sharply. What? You and the child. You're staying in this house. Under my protection. Absolutely not. It wasn't a request. Elena stood, placing herself between Sophia and the door. I don't know who you think you are. You know exactly who I am. Lucian's voice remained soft. I am the only person in this city with enough power to protect you from whoever killed Valentina Marchetti. You have been running for 5 years. Starving yourself. Living in a car. His eyes flickered to Sophia. And still they are getting closer. You know this. Elena said nothing. Because he was right. She did know. The near misses had been increasing. The shadows following them. The men asking questions at the shelters where they sometimes slept. I can keep you safe, Lucian said. Both of you. Why would you? The question hung in the air. Lucian looked at her, this exhausted, defiant woman who had sacrificed everything for a child who wasn't even hers. Because I failed Valentina, he said finally. I promised to protect her. I didn't. Her daughter has been hunted for 5 years because of my failure. He stepped closer. Not threatening, but present. Inescapable. I will not fail again. 3 days later. Elena still didn't trust him. She watched him constantly, tracking his movements through the estate, noting the guards stationed at every door, measuring the distance to every exit. But Sophia was different. The little girl, who flinched at every stranger, who hid behind Elena whenever someone new entered a room, who hadn't spoken in 2 years. She watched Lucien with something that looked almost like recognition. On the 3rd day, Elena found them together. She had been searching the East Wing in a panic, convinced Sophia had run off, when she turned a corner and froze. Lucien sat in the library, on the floor. His suit jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up, his black wolf tattoo visible in the lamplight. Sophia sat across from him. Between them was a chessboard. The little girl studied the pieces with intense concentration. Then, slowly, deliberately, she moved her knight. Lucien's lips twitched. Almost a smile. He moved his own piece in response. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Elena pressed her hand to her chest and tried to breathe past the sudden tightness. She had never seen Sophia engage with anyone like this. Never. What was it about this dangerous man that made a traumatized child feel safe? That evening. "She likes you." Lucien looked up from his desk as Elena entered his study. "The child. Her name is Sophia." "Sophia." He tested the name. Nodded slowly. "She has her mother's eyes." Elena's breath caught. "You knew Valentina well." "Well enough." He set down his pen. "She was brilliant. Resourceful. She had infiltrated a network that even my intelligence couldn't penetrate. She was close, so close, to exposing something massive." "What?" Lucien was silent for a long moment. "An assassination," he said finally. 11 years ago. A senator named Carmine Ferrante was killed in what appeared to be a carjacking. His death was ruled random violence. I remember that case. They never found the killers. Because the killers were protected. Lucien's eyes hardened. Ferrante was about to expose a corruption network that reached into the highest levels of Italian politics. His death was ordered by people who could make investigations disappear. Witnesses. Evidence. He paused. Children who saw too much. Elena's blood ran cold. Sophia. Valentina witnessed the meeting where the assassination was planned. She was a secretary for one of the men involved. She heard everything. Recorded it. But she was pregnant at the time. Alone. Terrified. She hid for years, waiting for the right moment to come forward. But someone found out. Someone always finds out. Lucien's voice was bitter. By the time she came to me, they were already closing in. I tried to move her to a safe location. I was too slow. And Sophia? She was there that night. In the warehouse. She saw her mother's killers. The words landed like stones. Elena sank into the chair across from his desk. "That's why they want her," she whispered. "Not just because of what Valentina knew. Because Sophia can identify them." "Yes. But she can't speak. She can't tell anyone. They don't know that." Lucien's fingers drummed against the desk. "And even if they did, a witness is a witness. As long as she lives, she's a threat." Elena pressed her hands to her face. 5 years. 5 years of running, hiding, starving. And it had all been for nothing. Because the people hunting Sophia would never stop. "Hey." The word was soft. Unexpected. She looked up to find Lucien watching her with something that almost looked like concern. "I meant what I said." His voice was quiet. "I will protect you. Both of you. Whatever it takes." "Why?" "Because I failed once." He held her gaze. "I don't fail twice." Chapter 5. The Cracks Begin. 2 weeks later. Elena had stopped planning escape routes. She didn't want to admit it, didn't want to acknowledge how comfortable she had become in this gilded cage, but the truth was undeniable. For the first time in 5 years, she wasn't running. The estate provided everything they needed. private tutors for Sophia, a full medical team to address Elena's malnutrition, security that made the fortress walls of ancient Naples look like paper. And Lucien. Lucien was a constant, looming presence. He never invaded her space, never demanded her attention, but he was always there, watching, waiting. She would catch glimpses of him throughout the day, in doorways, across courtyards, at the edges of rooms. His dark eyes would meet hers for a fraction of a second before sliding away. It should have been unsettling. It was unsettling. But it was also something else. Something she didn't want to name. One morning, Elena came downstairs to find a package on the breakfast table. Inside were 3 dresses. Simple. Elegant. Exactly her size. No note. No explanation. She turned to the butler, Alessandro. Where did these come from? Mr. Moretti, Signorina. Did he say why? He noticed your clothing was limited. Alessandro's expression remained carefully neutral. He wished for you to have options. Elena stared at the dresses. They weren't extravagant, weren't flashy. They were exactly what she would have chosen for herself, if she had ever had the luxury of choosing anything. She found Lucien in his study an hour later. The dresses. He didn't look up from his paperwork. Do they fit? I haven't tried them. Then how do you know they're wrong? I didn't say they were wrong. I said, she paused, frustrated. You can't just buy me things. Now he looked up. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. You have been wearing the same 3 outfits for 2 weeks, he said quietly. 2 of them have holes. One is stained with something you haven't been able to wash out. The child, Sophia, has new clothing because I purchased it. But you refused to let me buy anything for yourself. Because I'm not your charity case. No. He set down his pen. You're not. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Elena couldn't quite decipher. Then what am I? She asked. Lucien held her gaze for a long moment. Something I haven't figured out yet. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She wandered the halls of the estate, bare feet silent on cold marble, until she found herself in the library. Lucien was there. Of course he was. He sat in a leather armchair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw, the tired lines around his eyes. He looked exhausted, human, vulnerable. Elena almost retreated, but something kept her rooted in the doorway. Can't sleep? His voice was rough. He hadn't looked at her, but he knew she was there. No, neither can I. He took a sip of whiskey. Sit. She shouldn't. She knew she shouldn't. But she sat anyway, curling into the armchair across from him, pulling her legs up beneath her. They sat in silence for a long time. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. Outside, distant thunder rolled across the Naples sky. Why haven't you asked me more questions? Elena finally said. About Valentina. About Sophia. About the evidence. She studied his profile. You brought us here because of what we know. But you've barely interrogated me. I'm not interrogating you. Why not? Lucien was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to look at her, really look at her, and Elena felt something shift in the air between them. Because you're exhausted, he said softly. Because you've spent 5 years running from people who want to kill a child. Because you've given up everything, your career, your safety, your life, for someone else's daughter. He paused. You don't need interrogation, Elena. You need rest. Her throat tightened. No one had ever. No one had ever seen that. The evidence Valentina had, Elena whispered. I don't know where it is. I know. Sophia might. But I've never pushed her. I've never asked her to remember that night. I know that too. Then how are you planning to? I'm not. She blinked. What? Lucian turned back to the fire. Valentina's evidence would expose powerful enemies. It would give me leverage I've sought for years. But pursuing it would require questioning Sophia about the worst night of her life. He took another sip of whiskey. I won't do that. But she's 6 years old, Elena. His voice hardened slightly. She watched her mother die. She hasn't spoken since. I will not traumatize her further for political advantage. Elena stared at him. This man, this criminal, this killer, this wolf who ruled Naples through fear and blood, was choosing to protect a child's peace of mind over his own power. She didn't understand him. Not at all. But something in her chest cracked open anyway. Chapter 6. The Storm Inside. 1 month later. Elena wore the dresses. She didn't mean to, didn't want to admit that the soft fabric and perfect fit made her feel like herself for the first time in years, but practicality won out. Her old clothes were falling apart. The dresses were beautiful. And the way Lucian's eyes followed her when she entered a room. That was nothing. It meant nothing. It was completely irrelevant to her situation. She repeated this to herself every morning. Mid-afternoon. Elena was helping Sophia with her drawing when she heard raised voices from the main hall. She tensed immediately, pulling Sophia closer. Then she recognized Lucian's voice. He was angry. She had never heard him angry before. He was always so controlled, so measured, so terrifyingly calm. But now his voice carried through the walls, low and sharp and dangerous. You had one job, one surveillance point, and you let them through? A muffled response. I don't want excuses. I want answers. A pause. Someone in this organization is feeding information to the outside. Find out who. Tonight. Elena's blood ran cold. Someone inside. A traitor. She gathered Sophia and retreated to their room, locking the door behind them. 20 minutes later, there was a knock. Elena. Lucian's voice, calmer now but still edged with tension. Open the door. She did. He stood in the hallway looking more disheveled than she had ever seen him. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly mussed, and there was a darkness in his eyes that made her chest tight. There was a breach, he said quietly. Someone photographed the estate from the eastern perimeter. They were gone before my men could intercept. Sophia. They didn't get close enough to see inside. But they were looking. His jaw tightened. I'm increasing security. You won't leave the main house without an escort. Lucian. This isn't negotiable. The words were hard. But his eyes were worried. Afraid. For them. Elena nodded slowly. Okay. Something in his expression softened. I will find out who betrayed us, he said. And I will make them pay. It should have been a threat. It sounded like a promise. That night, Sophia had a nightmare. Elena woke to the small body thrashing beside her, silent screams trapped behind sealed lips. She gathered the child in her arms, rocking her, whispering soft nonsense until the tremors subsided. But Sophia wouldn't calm. Her eyes were open, fixed on some horror only she could see, and her fingers clawed at Elena's shirt with desperate strength. Elena tried everything. Songs. Stories. Her own heartbeat pressed against Sophia's ear. Nothing worked. Then the door opened. Lucian stood silhouetted in the hallway light. He didn't ask what was wrong. He simply crossed the room, sat on the edge of the bed, and began to speak. His voice was low, rhythmic. He told a story about a wolf who lived in the mountains, far from people, far from danger. A wolf who found a lost rabbit one winter and carried her home through the snow. The story had no violence, no villains, just snow and warmth and safety. Slowly, Sophia's tremors eased. Her grip on Elena loosened. Her eyes fluttered closed. She fell asleep with her small hand wrapped around Lucien's finger. He didn't pull away. Elena watched him in the darkness, this man she had feared, then resented, then reluctantly trusted, and something inside her shifted. Permanently. "You're good with her," she whispered. "I don't know how to be good with anyone." His voice was rough. "I just know how to protect." Sometimes that's the same thing. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. And Elena saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch, something raw and vulnerable and terrified. Something that looked almost like longing. "Get some sleep," he murmured. He extracted his finger from Sophia's grip with infinite gentleness and stood. "Lucien." He paused at the door. "Thank you." He didn't respond, but his hand lingered on the doorframe for just a moment too long before he disappeared into the darkness. Chapter 7. The Walls Come Down. 6 weeks later. Elena found herself thinking about Lucien at inappropriate moments. When she was supposed to be reviewing Sophia's progress with the speech therapist. When she was eating dinner in the grand dining room. When she was lying awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling. She thought about the way he moved, silent and predatory but somehow never threatening when he was near her. She thought about the way he spoke to Sophia, soft words and infinite patience, as if the child were made of something precious. She thought about his hands, large and scarred and capable of violence, yet impossibly gentle when they adjusted Sophia's blanket or steadied Elena's elbow on the stairs. She thought about his eyes, dark and unreadable to everyone else, but increasingly transparent to her. She could see the exhaustion now, the loneliness, the crushing weight of responsibility he carried. She thought about him constantly, and it terrified her. One afternoon, Elena was walking through the garden when she heard voices from the courtyard. Male voices. Unfamiliar. She approached cautiously and found Lucien speaking with a tall, handsome man she didn't recognize. They stood close together, postures tense, voices low. "You're taking a risk keeping them here," the stranger said. "If the councilman discovers." "The councilman won't discover anything unless someone tells him." "Lucien." The stranger's voice dropped. "This isn't like you. You don't take in strays. You don't compromise security for." "Be very careful how you finish that sentence, Alessandro." The warning in Lucien's voice could have frozen water. Alessandro held up his hands. "I'm not criticizing. I'm concerned. You've changed since they arrived. Everyone's noticed. I haven't changed. You personally oversee the child's education. You have her favorite foods prepared every morning. You check on them 3 times a night." Alessandro paused meaningfully. "And the woman? What about her? You look at her, Lucien. You—" He seemed to struggle for words. "You look at her like she's the only real thing in the room." Silence. Elena pressed her back against the wall, heart hammering. She shouldn't be hearing this. She should leave. But she couldn't move. "She's under my protection," Lucien said finally. His voice was carefully controlled. "That's all. Is it?" More silence. Then Lucien said, very quietly, "I don't know what she is." Elena stopped breathing. "But I know what I want her to be. And it's something I have no right to want." She fled before she could hear more. That evening, Elena avoided Lucien at dinner. Avoided him in the library. avoided him when he paused outside her door with a soft knock that she pretended not to hear. But she couldn't avoid her own thoughts. He looked at her like she was the only real thing in the room. He wanted her to be something he had no right to want. She had spent 5 years building walls. 5 years refusing to need anyone. 5 years convincing herself that attachment was weakness and love was a luxury she couldn't afford. And now this man, this dangerous, complicated, unexpectedly tender man, was dismantling everything she had built. She sat on the edge of her bed and pressed her hands to her face. She was in trouble. Later. A soft knock came at midnight. Elena opened the door to find Sophia standing in the hallway. The child's eyes were wide and urgent. She held a piece of paper in her hands. A drawing. Elena crouched down. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Another nightmare." Sophia shook her head. She pressed the drawing into Elena's hands with unusual intensity. Elena looked at it, and felt her blood turn to ice. It was a picture of a man with silver hair and cold eyes. A man standing in a room Elena didn't recognize, speaking to figures shrouded in shadow. But it was the badge on the man's chest that made her breath catch. A government seal. One of the figures in the shadows had a wolf tattoo. But it wasn't Lucien. The proportions were wrong. The wolf was different, twisted, wrong. Someone in Lucien's organization. Someone connected to the people who killed Valentina. Sophia had remembered something, and she was trying to tell them. Elena grabbed the child's hand and ran. Chapter 8. The Traitor. Lucien was in his study when Elena burst through the doors. He was on his feet instantly, hand reaching for the weapon at his hip, body coiling for violence. Then he saw her face. Saw Sophia's small form pressed against her side. Saw the drawing clutched in her trembling hands. What happened? She remembered. Elena shoved the drawing toward him. She remembered something from that night. Lucien took the paper. Studied it. His expression didn't change. But Elena watched something terrible move behind his eyes. Recognition, rage, betrayal. "You know who this is?" she whispered. "Yes." "Who?" He was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at her with eyes that had gone flat and cold. Predator's eyes, killer's eyes. "My brother." The truth unraveled quickly after that. Enzo Moretti. Lucien's younger brother. The family's golden child. The one who had left the business years ago to pursue legitimate politics, or so everyone believed. In reality, Enzo had been playing both sides. Working with the same corrupt officials who ordered Senator Ferrante's assassination. Feeding information to Lucien's enemies. Building his own power base in the shadows. And 5 years ago, when Valentina Marchetti came too close to the truth, he had been the one to give the order. "She came to me," Lucien said. His voice was hollow. "Valentina came to me for protection. And my own brother was the one hunting her." Elena sat across from him, still holding Sophia's hand. "You didn't know." "I should have known." His fist slammed against the desk. "I should have seen it. The gaps in our intelligence. The failed operations. The leaks." He laughed bitterly. He was sitting at my table every Sunday, drinking my wine, smiling at me while he... His voice broke. Elena had never seen him like this. Shattered. Undone. She rose from her chair before she could think better of it and crossed to where he stood. Her hand found his arm. He flinched at the contact, as if he had forgotten what gentle touch felt like. "This isn't your fault," she said quietly. "I failed her. You're not failing now." She tightened her grip. "You found the truth. You found us. And you're going to stop him." Lucien looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. Something cracked in his expression. "I'm going to kill him," he said softly. "My own brother. I'm going to destroy everything he's built and everyone who helped him. And his voice caught. I don't know if there will be anything left of me when it's done." "There will be." "How do you know?" Elena held his gaze. "Because Sophia needs you. And you won't abandon her." She paused. "Neither will I." The words hung between them, a promise neither of them was ready to examine too closely. Lucien's hand came up slowly, tentatively, and covered hers where it rested on his arm. His touch was warm, gentle, trembling. "Elena." "Don't." She shook her head. "Don't say anything you can't take back. Not tonight." He nodded slowly, but his hand didn't move from hers. And when Sophia climbed out of her chair and pressed herself against his leg, her small arms wrapping around his knee, something in Lucien's face finally broke. He crouched down and gathered the child into his arms. His eyes closed. His jaw tightened. And for just a moment, Elena saw the man behind the monster, lonely and broken and desperately trying to protect the only people who had made him feel human in 20 years. Chapter 9. The Reckoning Approaches. 3 days later. Lucien had gone dark. Not literally. He was still present, still issuing orders, still overseeing security. But something in him had retreated. He no longer joined them for meals. No longer appeared in the library for chess with Sophia. No longer knocked softly on Elena's door to check that they were safe. He was preparing for war. And war, Elena was learning, required him to become someone she didn't recognize. She watched him through windows and across courtyards, giving orders with cold precision, meeting with men whose faces were hard and scarred, poring over maps and documents with the focus of a general planning a siege. The black wolf tattoo seemed darker now, more prominent, as if it were bleeding into the rest of him. He was becoming the monster again. And she understood why. But she hated it anyway. One evening, Elena found him on the balcony outside his study. He stood with his back to her, staring out at the Naples skyline, whiskey in hand. "You should be asleep," he said without turning. "So should you." "I don't sleep. I've noticed." She stepped closer. "Neither do I any more." He turned then. The moonlight caught the exhaustion carved into his face, deeper than before, sharper, more permanent. "You're worried," he said. "Yes." "About the attack?" "About you." Something flickered in his eyes. "You shouldn't waste concern on me. Someone has to." She stopped a few feet away from him, arms wrapped around herself against the cool night air. "When was the last time anyone worried about you, Lucien?" He didn't answer. But the silence was answer enough. "I'm going to be fine," he said finally. "Liar." His lips twitched. "I'm the most powerful man in southern Italy. I've survived assassinations, betrayals, wars. I will survive this. Surviving isn't the same as living." He flinched. Elena stepped closer. "You told me once that you didn't know how to be good with anyone. That you only knew how to protect." She held his gaze. "But protection without connection is just control. It's just another form of isolation." "What would you have me do?" His voice was rough. "Open my heart? Lower my guard? Trust people who have proven, again and again, that they will betray me? Not people." Elena's voice was soft. "Just us." The words hung in the air. Lucien stared at her. His hand lifted, almost involuntarily, and his fingers brushed her jaw. A feather touch. A question. "I don't know how," he whispered. "Neither do I." She leaned into his touch. "But I'm willing to figure it out. If you are." He closed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "I have wanted you since the moment you opened your eyes in that hospital bed. Since you looked at me like I was the monster everyone warned you about, and still demanded to know where Sophia was." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I have wanted you every day since. And I have told myself again and again that I have no right. Lucien, you deserve better." His eyes opened, anguished, desperate. "You deserve someone who isn't covered in blood. Someone who doesn't have to plan his brother's execution. Someone who—" Elena silenced him the only way she could think of. She kissed him. Soft. Tentative. A question, not a demand. His whole body went rigid. For a terrible moment, she thought she had misread everything. Then his arms came around her, tight, desperate, consuming, and he kissed her back like she was oxygen and he had been drowning for years. Later, they stood on the balcony, foreheads pressed together, breathing each other's air. Neither of them had moved beyond that kiss. Neither of them needed to. "When this is over," Lucien murmured, "I'm going to take you away from here. Somewhere safe. Somewhere no one knows my name." "And Sophia? She comes with us." His voice was fierce. "She's ours now. Mine." Elena's heart cracked open. Ours. Mine. After 5 years of fighting alone, she wasn't alone anymore. "I need you to promise me something," Lucien said. "What?" "If something goes wrong tomorrow, if Enzo's people are stronger than we anticipated, I need you to take Sophia and run. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. No. Elena." "No." She pulled back to look at him. "I'm not losing you now. Not after everything. You might not have a choice. Then I'll make one." Her hands framed his face. "You don't get to sacrifice yourself, Lucien. That's not how this works. We stay together. All of us. Or we fall together." He stared at her for a long moment. Then something in his expression shifted, something that looked almost like hope. "Together," he repeated. "Together." He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, a promise sealed in silence. And somewhere in the house behind them, a little girl slept peacefully for the first time in years, dreaming of wolves who protected instead of hunted. Chapter 10. The Breaking Point. The next morning. The attack came at dawn. Not on the estate. Lucien's security was too strong for a direct assault. But on the convoy transporting evidence to the prosecutor's office. Enzo had anticipated Lucien's move. Had placed his own people inside the security team. And when the convoy was ambushed on a mountain road outside Naples, 3 of Lucien's most trusted men died before reinforcements could arrive. The evidence was scattered across the asphalt, photographs, recordings, documents, blowing in the wind like confetti. But the most critical piece was gone. The original recording of the meeting where Senator Ferrante's assassination was planned, the recording that could bring down a sitting government minister and expose 20 years of corruption, had been taken. By the time Lucien reached the scene, there was nothing left but blood and broken glass. That evening, Elena found him in his study. He sat behind his desk, perfectly still, staring at nothing. His face was a mask. But his hands, resting on the desk surface, were shaking. "Lucien." He didn't respond. She crossed the room and knelt beside his chair. "Look at me." Slowly, his eyes focused on her face. There was nothing there. No anger. No grief. Just emptiness. 3 men, he said quietly. 3 men I've known for 15 years. Dead. Because my brother, his voice cracked. Because I was too slow. Too careful. This isn't your fault. Everyone says that. His laugh was hollow. Everyone always says that. And it's never true. It's true today. He shook his head. The recording is gone, Elena. Without it, there's no case. No proof. Enzo wins. His jaw tightened. My brother murders, betrays, destroys, and he wins. No. You don't understand. I understand that you're giving up. Elena grabbed his hands, stilled their trembling through sheer force of will. I understand that you've decided the fight is over. And I'm telling you it's not. How can you possibly? Because Sophia still has pieces of the truth. Elena's voice was fierce. She's been drawing. Every day. Pictures of faces, places, conversations she shouldn't remember. She's been trying to tell us something, and we haven't been listening. Lucien went still. What? Her therapist noticed it last week. The drawings aren't random. They're memories. Specific, detailed memories of what she witnessed. Elena tightened her grip on his hands. Sophia knows what was on that recording. She was there. She heard everything. She can't speak. She can't speak yet. Elena's eyes blazed. But she can draw. And she can nod or shake her head. And with the right questions, careful questions, she might be able to help us reconstruct what was on that recording. For a long moment, Lucien didn't respond. Then something shifted in his face. Hope. Fragile. Tentative. But real. I won't pressure her, he said carefully. I won't traumatize her for. I know. Elena softened. That's why I'll be the one asking. And you'll be there to make her feel safe. She paused. Together. Remember. He looked at her. This woman who had collapsed in a grocery store 6 weeks ago, starving, desperate, alone. This woman who had fought for a child not her own, who had trusted a monster, who had seen through his armor to something worth saving. He brought her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles. Together. Chapter 11. The Testimony. 2 days later. The room was quiet. Elena sat on the floor of the library, surrounded by art supplies. Crayons, markers, paper, everything Sophia might need. Lucien sat nearby in his usual armchair, deliberately relaxed, deliberately non-threatening. Sophia stood between them, clutching her rabbit, watching with wary eyes. "Hey, sweet girl." Elena's voice was soft. "Remember how we talked about your drawings? How they tell stories?" Sophia nodded slowly. "I want you to draw something for me today. Something you remember from when you were very small. From when you lived with your mama." The child's grip on the rabbit tightened. Elena reached out and gently stroked her hair. "You don't have to if you don't want to. This is your choice. But if you do," she glanced at Lucien. "Lucien and I will be here the whole time. And no matter what you draw, we'll keep you safe. Okay." Sophia looked at Lucien. He met her gaze steadily. "Always," he said quietly. "Always safe." Something shifted in the child's face. Resolution. Determination. She sat down on the floor, selected a black crayon, and began to draw. 3 hours later. The library floor was covered in paper. Dozens of drawings, scattered like fallen leaves. Faces. Places. Symbols. Elena moved through them carefully, photographing each one, while Lucien crouched beside Sophia and asked gentle questions. "This man here," he pointed to a figure in a suit. "Do you remember his voice? Was it high or low?" Sophia held her hand low. "Deep voice." Lucien nodded. "Did he talk to the other man? The one with the eagle pin?" A nod. "What about this room?" He indicated a drawing of an ornate office. "Was it daytime or nighttime when you were there?" Sophia picked up a yellow crayon and drew a sun in the corner. "Daytime." Every answer built a picture. Every picture built a case. And slowly, impossibly, the truth emerged. Sophia had not just witnessed her mother's final conversation. She had witnessed the original conspiracy. Years before Valentina's death, when Sophia was barely 4, she had been present during a meeting her mother was secretly recording. A meeting between Enzo Moretti, a government minister, and the men who would later murder Senator Ferrante. She had seen their faces, heard their plans, and through some miracle of traumatic memory, she had preserved every detail in perfect, terrible clarity. That evening, Elena found Lucien on the balcony again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Sophia sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket, her small hand resting on his knee. He was telling her another wolf story. This one about a pack that had been scattered, lost and alone in the darkness, until the alpha found them one by one and brought them home. Elena leaned against the doorframe and listened. When the story ended, Sophia made a sound. Soft, almost inaudible, but definitely a sound. "Lupo," she whispered, her first word in 2 years. "Wolf." Lucien's entire body went rigid. He looked at the child, this broken, traumatized, impossibly brave little girl, and something in his face crumbled completely. "Yes, Piccola," he said hoarsely. "Il Lupo. I will always be your wolf." Sophia climbed into his lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. And Elena watched, tears streaming silently down her face, as the most dangerous man in Naples held a 6-year-old girl like she was made of starlight. 2 weeks later, the investigation was progressing. With Sophia's drawings as a foundation, prosecutors were able to identify key players in the conspiracy. Witnesses came forward. Documents surfaced. The web of corruption that had protected Enzo Moretti and his allies for 20 years began to unravel. But Enzo knew he was cornered. And cornered animals were dangerous. One night, Elena woke to the sound of breaking glass. She was on her feet immediately, heart pounding, reaching for Sophia. But Sophia wasn't in the bed. The door to the hallway was open. And somewhere in the house, alarms were screaming. Chapter 12. The Taking. Elena ran. Through smoke-filled hallways, past shattered windows, over bodies of men she didn't recognize. "Sophia!" Her voice echoed off marble walls. No response. She reached the east wing, Sophia's favorite hiding spot, and found the door ripped off its hinges. Inside, the room was destroyed. Furniture overturned. Art supplies scattered. And on the floor, a stuffed rabbit. Abandoned. Covered in blood. Elena's knees gave out. "No. No, no, no." "Elena." She spun around. Lucien stood in the doorway, breathing hard, blood splattered across his white shirt. His face was pale, paler than she had ever seen it, and his eyes were wild. "Where is she?" Elena's voice broke. "Lucien, where is she?" "Enzo has her." 3 words. 3 impossible words. He came for her himself. His men created a diversion while he, Lucien's voice cracked. "They were gone before I could." Elena launched herself at him. Her fists struck his chest, his shoulders, his face. "You promised." She was screaming now, completely unhinged. "You promised you would keep her safe." Lucien didn't defend himself, didn't block her blows. He simply stood there, absorbing her rage, absorbing her grief, absorbing everything she threw at him. And when her strength finally gave out, when she collapsed against his chest, sobbing, he caught her, held her, pressed his lips to her hair. "I will get her back," he said. His voice was steady now, cold, precise, utterly lethal. "I will burn this city to the ground if I have to. But I will get her back." "How?" "Enzo wants a trade. Sophia for the evidence. He's given us until sunrise." Elena pulled back. "Then give it to him." It's not that simple. The evidence is already with the prosecutors. If I retrieve it, I don't care. Elena grabbed his shirt, pulling him close. She's 6 years old, Lucian. She's alone and terrified, and she finally started speaking again, and I will not let her. Her voice broke completely. Lucian cupped her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed away her tears. "Listen to me," he said softly. "I have a plan. But you're not going to like it. Tell me. I'm going to give him what he wants." "The evidence?" "Me." The plan was insane. Lucian would offer himself in exchange for Sophia. His life for hers. Once the child was safe, his men would move in. The chances of Lucian surviving were minimal. He knew this, and he was going to do it anyway. "You can't." Elena gripped his arms with desperate strength. "You can't trade yourself for her." "I can. You'll die. Possibly. Lucian." "She's 6 years old, Elena." His voice was gentle. "She's your daughter in every way that matters. And she's—" he paused, something shifting in his eyes. "She's mine now, too. I won't let her die. But I don't want to lose you either." The words tore out of her, raw, uncontrolled, devastating. Lucian stilled. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he kissed her. Not gently. Not tentatively. Desperately. Hungrily. Like he was memorizing the taste of her. When he pulled back, his forehead pressed against hers. "If I don't come back," he whispered, "you take Sophia and you run. You build a life. You heal. You love again." His voice cracked. "Promise me." Elena closed her eyes. "I can't. Elena. I can't promise that." She looked at him, really looked at him, and let him see everything she had been hiding. "Because I love you, Lucian Moretti. I love you, and I won't promise to forget you." His breath caught. "Elena." "I love you," she repeated. "And if you die tonight, I will spend the rest of my life making sure your brother pays for it. But I will not pretend I don't care. I will not." He kissed her again. Softer this time. "A promise." "Then I won't die," he said against her lips. "For you. For her. I won't die." End of Batch 1. Cliffhanger. 12 hours later. A warehouse on the Naples waterfront. Lucian walked into the darkness alone. No weapons. No backup. Not yet. Just him and the monster who had destroyed everything. His brother stood in the center of the space, immaculate in a tailored suit, Sophia clutched in his grip like a human shield. The child's eyes found Lucian immediately. Recognition. Hope. Fear. "Brother," Enzo said, smiling. "So good of you to come. Let her go." "Oh, I will. Once you've signed over everything. The syndicate. The evidence. And your confession to crimes you didn't commit." Enzo's smile widened. "I want you destroyed, Lucian. Publicly. Completely. Then, and only then, will I let your little pet go." Lucian's hands curled into fists at his sides. His eyes found Sophia's. "It's going to be okay, Piccola," he said softly. "Il Lupo is here." Sophia's lip trembled. Then, in a voice barely louder than a breath, "Papa." The word hit Lucian like a bullet. Papa. Father. She had called him father. And Enzo, seeing the emotion crack through Lucian's armor, laughed. "How touching. The wolf has a heart after all." He pressed a gun to Sophia's temple. "Let's see if it still beats when I take everything he loves." Outside the warehouse, Elena watched the monitors in the surveillance van, her hands pressed to her mouth. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. could only watch as the man she loved walked into a trap that might destroy them all. Then the lights went out. And everything exploded. End of Batch 1. Word count: 8, 100 words. Batch 2. The Black Wolf's Secret, continued. Chapter 13. Into the Dark. The explosion tore through the warehouse like the wrath of God. Elena threw herself backward, shielding her eyes from the blinding flash that lit up the surveillance monitors. The van rocked on its wheels, and she heard Marco's voice screaming through the comms. Breach! Breach! All units move. Then static. Nothing but static. Lucien! Elena clawed at the van door. Lucien! Hands grabbed her arms, restraining her. Alessandro's voice, rough with urgency. You can't go in there. The boss gave strict orders. The boss is going to die. The boss knows what he's doing. Alessandro's grip tightened. You go in there now, you become a liability. A hostage. Another weapon Enzo can use against him. Elena stopped struggling. Not because she agreed, but because she knew he was right. Through the smoke and chaos of the monitors, she watched the warehouse burn, and prayed to every god she had ever believed in. Inside the warehouse, Lucien moved through fire. The explosion had been his, a controlled detonation designed to kill the lights and create chaos. His men had been waiting in the shadows, armed and ready. But so had Enzo's. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Lucien rolled behind a concrete pillar, bullets sparking off metal inches from his head. He drew his weapon, a sleek 9mm that felt like an extension of his arm, and returned fire with lethal precision. 1 target down. 2, 3. But his eyes weren't on his enemies. They were scanning the darkness for Sophia. Piccola! His voice echoed off the burning walls. Where are you? No response. The fire was spreading, consuming the old wooden rafters, filling the space with choking black smoke. Through the chaos, Lucien caught a glimpse of movement. Enzo! Dragging Sophia toward a rear exit. The child wasn't screaming, wasn't crying. She hung limp in Enzo's grip, eyes wide with the kind of terror that transcended expression. Lucien's vision went red. He burst from cover, firing as he ran, every shot calculated to avoid the child, to force Enzo to release her. But his brother was always one step ahead. The rear door burst open. A helicopter's rotors screamed in the night air. Lucien! Marco's voice, somewhere behind him. Lucien didn't stop. He couldn't stop. If Enzo got Sophia on that helicopter, she was gone. Forever. He sprinted through the door, and felt something slam into his side. The bullet tore through his lower ribs, spinning him sideways, sending him crashing to the concrete. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot, blinding, all-consuming. Through blurred vision, he saw Enzo climbing into the helicopter. Saw Sophia's small hand reaching toward him. Heard her voice, that impossible, precious voice, crying out, "Papa! Papa!" The helicopter lifted off, and Lucien watched helplessly as the child who had called him father was carried into the darkness. Back in the van, Elena watched the helicopter disappear. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She simply stopped. Everything stopped. Sound, color, time itself. Sophia was gone. Lucien was shot. She could see him on the monitor, bleeding out on the tarmac while Marco shouted for a medic. And she had done nothing. Nothing. Hours later, the hospital corridor was white. Sterile. Silent. Elena sat in a plastic chair, hands folded in her lap, staring at the wall. She hadn't spoken since they arrived. Hadn't eaten. Hadn't moved. Marco tried to get her attention several times, offering water, information, comfort, but she didn't respond. couldn't respond. Because if she opened her mouth, she would start screaming. And if she started screaming, she would never stop. Midnight. The surgeon emerged looking exhausted. He's stable. The bullet missed his vital organs, but he lost a significant amount of blood. He's asking for... Elena was already on her feet. Already moving. She pushed past the surgeon, past the guards, past everyone who tried to slow her down, and burst into Lucien's room. He lay on the hospital bed, pale and hooked to a dozen machines, his torso wrapped in white bandages already blooming with red. But his eyes were open, and when he saw her, something in his face crumbled. "I'm sorry." His voice was raw, broken. "I'm sorry. I tried. I couldn't." Elena crossed to the bed and pressed her lips to his forehead. "We'll get her back. Elena. We will get her back." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "This isn't over. It's not. It can't be." Her voice finally broke. The tears came, hot and relentless and completely beyond her control. Lucien's hand found hers. His grip was weak, so much weaker than it should have been, but his voice was steady. "I swear to you," he said quietly, "on my life, on everything I am, I will bring her home." Chapter 14. The Silence After. 3 days later. Lucien discharged himself from the hospital against medical advice. He couldn't stay, couldn't rest, couldn't breathe while Sophia was still in Enzo's hands. Elena didn't argue. She simply wrapped his wounds, helped him dress, and walked beside him through the hospital corridors like a silent shadow. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The estate felt wrong without Sophia. Her drawings still covered the library floor. Her stuffed rabbit sat on the bed she had been taken from. Her presence lingered in every corner, every shadow, every silence. Elena couldn't bear to enter Sophia's room. But she couldn't bear to stay away either. She found herself standing in the doorway at odd hours, 2 a.m., 5 a.m., noon, just staring at the empty bed, the abandoned toys, the small indent in the pillow where Sophia's head had rested. She was losing herself. She knew it. Didn't care. Lucien worked in silence. He was on the phone constantly, tracking leads, coordinating with contacts, calling in favors from people whose names Elena didn't recognize and didn't want to know. Enzo had disappeared. The helicopter had been traced to an airfield near Rome, but the trail went cold from there. International channels. Private planes. A dozen aliases and a network of corruption that stretched across borders. Finding Sophia would require time they didn't have. Every hour she was gone was another hour she might be. Lucien refused to finish that thought. He couldn't. If he did, he would shatter completely. One night, Elena found him on the balcony again. But this time, he wasn't staring at the skyline. He was staring at a photograph. Sophia's school picture, the one Elena had taken secretly at a park 6 months ago, when the light was golden and the child had almost smiled. "She's alive." Elena startled. "What?" "My sources confirmed. Enzo is keeping her alive as leverage. He knows she's the only thing that can guarantee his safety." Lucien's voice was hollow. "He won't kill her. Not yet." Elena should have felt relief. She didn't. Where is she? Rome. Possibly. Or Albania. The trail keeps shifting. He set down the photograph. "I have people working on it. The best people. But Enzo knows my network. He knows how to stay hidden. Then we find another way." Lucien looked at her. "What other way?" Elena's jaw tightened. "You said Enzo wants you destroyed. Publicly. Completely." She stepped closer. "What if we give him that?" "What do you mean?" "What if we make him think he's won?" The plan took shape over the following week. It was desperate, dangerous, and potentially suicidal. But it was all they had. Lucien would publicly step down as head of the Moretti organization, claiming illness, betrayal, or whatever story Enzo wanted to spread. He would sign over control of key assets. He would appear broken, defeated, destroyed. And when Enzo emerged to claim his victory, when he felt safe enough to show his face, they would strike. "He won't believe it," Mako argued. "He knows you too well. He knows the Lucien I was." Lucien's voice was quiet. "He doesn't know who I've become." His eyes found Elena across the room. She looked back at him, exhausted, grieving, but still standing. Still fighting. Still with him. "I've never had something to lose before," Lucien said softly. "Enzo doesn't understand that. He thinks I'm the same man I was before. The man who would sacrifice anything for power." He paused. "I'm not that man anymore." Chapter 15. The Performance. 2 weeks later. The press conference was held at the Moretti corporate headquarters in central Naples. Lucien stood at a podium, dressed in a dark suit, his face carefully composed into an expression of defeated resignation. Behind him, Elena watched from the shadows. Her heart was in her throat. This had to work. It had to. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lucien began, his voice slightly raspy, intentionally weakened to suggest illness. "I come before you today to announce my retirement from leadership of the Moretti family and all associated business interests." The room erupted. Shouted questions. Camera flashes. Chaos. Lucien held up his hand. "This decision was not made lightly. But recent events have shown me that the burdens of this position are more than I can bear. Effective immediately, I am transferring control to my brother Enzo Moretti, who has graciously agreed to assume responsibility." More chaos. More questions. One reporter pushed forward. "Mr. Moretti, is it true that you've been in declining health? I'm afraid I can't discuss my medical situation in detail. But yes, recent months have been difficult." Another reporter. "And the allegations against your brother? The rumors of his involvement in criminal activity?" Lucien's expression flickered. Just for a moment. Just long enough for the cameras to catch it. "I can only speak to what I know. And what I know is that my brother has agreed to take the reins of this organization in my absence. I trust him to lead with honor." The words tasted like ash in his mouth. But he said them anyway. Because somewhere in Rome, or Albania, or wherever Enzo had taken her, Sophia was waiting. And Lucien would play whatever role was necessary to bring her home. That evening, the news spread like wildfire. Lucien Moretti steps down. The Black Wolf defeated. Enzo Moretti rises to power. Elena watched the headlines scroll across Lucien's computer and felt sick. "He'll see through this," she whispered. "He has to." "He won't." Lucien's voice was calm. "Enzo has always believed I was invincible. Unbreakable. The idea that I could be brought low by emotion, by attachment," he shook his head. "It's incomprehensible to him. It's my greatest weakness and my greatest weapon." Elena looked at him. "I'm your weakness? You and Sophia." He met her eyes. "The only weaknesses I've ever allowed myself." "And that's a weapon? Against a man like Enzo?" Lucien's smile was cold. "Yes, because he will never believe I'm capable of it. He'll think the retirement is genuine. He'll think I've finally broken. And when he comes out of hiding to claim his victory, we strike. We strike." Chapter 16. The Waiting. 3 weeks passed. 21 days of watching. Waiting. Hoping. The world believed Lucien had surrendered. Enzo made increasingly public appearances, attending galas, giving interviews, playing the role of legitimate businessman with practiced ease. But he didn't release Sophia, didn't even acknowledge her existence. The child had become a ghost, leverage held in reserve, insurance against the possibility that Lucien might be playing a longer game. "He's testing us," Marco said during one of their nightly briefings. "Seeing if we'll make a move. Then we don't move." Lucien's voice was steady, but Elena could see the strain in his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. "We wait. For how long?" "As long as it takes." Elena struggled. She tried to hide it, tried to be strong, to be useful, to be the partner Lucien needed, but the grief was consuming her. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, spent hours staring at Sophia's drawings, searching for clues that weren't there. One night, Lucien found her curled on the floor of Sophia's room, clutching the stuffed rabbit to her chest. "Elena." She didn't look up. "Hey." He lowered himself carefully to the floor beside her, movements still stiff from his healing wound, and pulled her against his chest. "Talk to me." "There's nothing to say. There's always something." She was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, "What if we don't get her back?" "We will." "What if she's already?" "She's not." "But what if?" Lucien tightened his arms around her. "Listen to me." His voice was fierce. "I have lost everything in my life that ever mattered. My mother, my father, my humanity. I lost them all because I was too slow, too weak, too afraid to fight." He pulled back to look at her face. "I will not lose you. I will not lose Sophia. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who I have to become. I am bringing that child home." Elena searched his eyes, saw the certainty there, the ferocity, the love. "I believe you," she whispered. "Good." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Because I need you to be strong. I need you to fight. I can't do this without you. You could. You would. I don't want to." His voice cracked. "I spent 46 years alone, Elena. Cold. Untouchable. I don't want that anymore. I want—" He paused. Swallowed. "I want to come home at night and find you reading. I want to teach Sophia chess and watch her beat me. I want—" "A family." He closed his eyes. "Yes." Elena kissed him, soft and sad and full of promise. "Then we'll get one." Chapter 17. The Break. Day 32. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of Enzo's former mistresses, a woman named Juliana who had been discarded after discovering too much about his operations, approached Marco with information. "He has property in Albania," she said, voice trembling with fear and rage. "A villa on the coast, near Vlora. He uses it for special guests. People he doesn't want found." "How do you know?" "Because he took me there once." Her eyes hardened. "After I learned about Senator Ferrante. He was going to kill me, but I convinced him I was useful. It took me 3 years to escape." Marco leaned forward. "Is there a child there?" "A little girl." Juliana's face softened. "I heard the guards talking about a new arrival. Small, silent, terrified." She paused. "They called her Il Testimone, the witness." That night, Lucien stood before a wall of maps and photographs, his face lit by the glow of computer screens. "The villa is heavily fortified," Marco reported. 20 guards minimum. Surveillance on all access points. Reinforced doors. It would take an army to breach it directly. Then we don't breach it directly." Elena stepped forward from the shadows. "What do you mean?" Lucien's eyes were fixed on a satellite image of the Albanian coastline. Enzo is expecting me to attack. He's built his defenses around that assumption. A cold smile crossed his face. But I'm not going to attack. Then what? I'm going to surrender. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Lucien would contact Enzo directly, offer a complete and unconditional surrender, his confession, his assets, his freedom, in exchange for Sophia's release. Enzo, convinced of his brother's weakness, would agree. He would bring Sophia to a neutral location for the exchange. And when he did, when he finally stepped out of his fortress, Lucien's people would be waiting. "It's a trap," Mako said flatly. "He'll see it coming." "Maybe." Lucien's voice was calm. "But he'll come anyway." "Why?" "Because he wants this. He's wanted it his entire life, to stand over me, victorious. To take everything I have." Lucien's jaw tightened. "He'll risk it. I know my brother. And if you're wrong?" Silence. Then Elena's voice, quiet but steady. "Then we lose everything." Lucien met her eyes across the room. "Then we lose everything," he agreed. Chapter 18. The Exchange. Day 40. The location was a shipping warehouse on the Italian coast. Neutral ground. Or so Enzo believed. Lucien arrived alone, as demanded. No guards. No weapons. Nothing but the clothes on his back and the wolf tattoo that marked him as what he was. The warehouse was vast and empty, lit by flickering industrial lights that cast long shadows across concrete floors. Enzo waited at the center, and beside him, held by a guard's unforgiving grip, Sophia. She looked smaller than Lucien remembered. Thinner. Her eyes were huge and dark, filled with the same emptiness they had held 2 years ago, before Elena, before hope, before family. She had retreated back into herself, and the sight of it nearly broke him. "Brother!" Enzo's voice echoed off the walls. "So good of you to come. Let her go. First, the terms." Enzo smiled, that charming, poisonous smile that had fooled so many. "You sign over everything. The syndicate, the companies, the evidence against me. And then you make a public statement confessing to every crime I've ever committed." "Done." Enzo's eyebrows rose. "That easily? She's worth more than any of it." Lucien's eyes never left Sophia. "Let her go." "Interesting." Enzo studied his brother with something approaching curiosity. The great Lucien Moretti, brought low by sentiment. "Our father would be ashamed. Our father was a monster. And what are you?" Lucien didn't answer. His eyes were still fixed on Sophia, on the tears tracking silently down her cheeks, on the way her small hands clutched at nothing, reaching for comfort that wasn't there. "Papa." Her voice was barely a whisper. Broken. "Papa, please." Something in Lucien's chest shattered. "Let her go," he said again. "Now." Enzo hesitated. For one terrible moment, Lucien thought he would refuse, would see through the trap, would take Sophia and disappear forever. But Enzo's arrogance won out. He gestured to the guard. The man released Sophia. She ran. Across the warehouse floor, small feet pounding on concrete, straight into Lucien's waiting arms. He caught her, held her, pressed his lips to her hair and felt her small body shaking against his chest. "It's okay, Piccola. I've got you. You're safe. You're safe." Touching. Enzo's voice cut through the moment. "Now, the documents." Lucien straightened slowly, Sophia still clutched against his chest. "Of course." He reached into his jacket. Enzo's men tensed, hands moving toward weapons. But Lucien only withdrew a folded piece of paper. "Everything you asked for," he said quietly. "My confession. My assets. My life, essentially. He held it out. Take it. Enzo stepped forward, reached for the paper, and the world exploded. The first sniper shot took out Enzo's lead guard. The second killed the man behind him. The third went wide, because Enzo was already moving, already drawing his weapon, already proving that he had inherited their father's survival instincts along with his cruelty. Lucien shoved Sophia behind a concrete pillar. Stay down. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Lucien's men poured through the warehouse doors. Marco in the lead, weapons blazing, cutting through Enzo's guards with brutal efficiency. But Enzo was running. Toward a side exit. Toward freedom. Toward another chance to disappear, to regroup, to come back and destroy everything Lucien loved. Lucien couldn't let that happen. He kissed Sophia's forehead. Stay here. Elena will find you. I promise. Then he ran. The chase took them through the warehouse's industrial maze, past rusted equipment, through narrow corridors, into a loading dock overlooking the dark water of the harbor. Enzo reached the dock first, but his escape route was gone. The boat that should have been waiting had been sunk by Lucien's people an hour before. He spun around, weapon raised. Lucien stood at the other end of the dock, breathing hard, blood seeping through his shirt where his wound had reopened. It's over, Enzo. It's never over. His brother's eyes were wild, desperate. You think you've won? You think you can defeat me? I have allies you've never heard of. Resources you can't imagine. I will rebuild. I will. No. Lucien's voice was quiet. You won't. Then kill me. Enzo spread his arms wide. Do it. Prove you're still the monster father raised. I'm not going to kill you. Enzo's laugh was bitter. Weak. You've always been weak, Lucien. Hiding behind honor and restraint when... I'm not going to kill you, Lucien repeated, because death would be too easy. You're going to prison, Enzo. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell, watching everything you built be dismantled, watching your allies abandon you, watching the world forget you ever existed. Enzo's face contorted with rage. You can't. I already have. Lucien held up his phone. Every word you've said tonight has been recorded, transmitted live to the prosecutor's office. Combined with Sophia's testimony and Valentina's evidence, you're finished. For one long moment, Enzo stared at his brother. Then his face went blank, and he raised his weapon. If I'm going to hell, he said quietly, I'm taking you with me. He pulled the trigger. Lucien dove sideways. But he wasn't fast enough. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around, sending him crashing to the dock. Enzo walked toward him, weapon steady, eyes dead. Always the hero, he whispered. Always the noble wolf. But wolves die too, brother. He aimed at Lucien's head. His finger tightened on the trigger, and a single shot rang out from the warehouse doorway. Enzo staggered, looked down at the bloom of red spreading across his chest, looked up. Elena stood in the doorway, Marco's backup weapon in her hands, her face streaked with tears and grime and absolute, unshakable resolve. Not tonight, she said. Enzo's weapon clattered to the dock. He fell to his knees. Then sideways. His eyes, so like Lucien's, so different from Lucien's, found his brother's face one last time. She really does love you, he whispered. Then his eyes closed. He wasn't dead. Elena had aimed for exactly where it would drop him without killing. The same precision that had once made her a promising medical student. The same hands that had held a dying woman 5 years ago now saved the man who had killed her. Not for his sake. For Lucien's. Because Lucien had said he wouldn't carry his brother's death. And Elena would not force him to. Paramedics swarmed the dock within minutes. Enzo was stabilized, handcuffed to a stretcher, and loaded into a police transport. His eyes never opened again that night. But he would survive. He would stand trial. He would rot. And Lucien. Lucien was still lying on the dock, bleeding from 2 wounds now, his vision graying at the edges. Elena reached him first. "Stay with me." She pressed both hands against his shoulder wound, applying pressure with the desperate efficiency of someone who had done this before. "Stay with me, Lucien. Don't you dare." "Sophia," he rasped. "Is she?" "Marco has her. She's safe. She's asking for you." His eyes fluttered closed. "Lucien." Elena's voice cracked. "Lucien. I'm here." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "I'm not going anywhere. I promised." "Then open your eyes." He opened them. Found hers. Dark. Fierce. Terrified. Beautiful. "You shot my brother," he murmured. "He was going to kill you. You shot my brother. Are you complaining?" "No." His hand found hers, slippery with his own blood, and held on. "I'm falling in love with you all over again." Elena made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You're impossible. And you're everything." His eyes closed again. But he was smiling. Chapter 19. The Pieces. 5 days later. The hospital room was quiet. Not the cold, sterile quiet of before, but something softer. Warmer. Lucien lay propped against pillows, his shoulder immobilized, his torso re-wrapped in fresh bandages. The machines beeped their steady reassurance. Elena sat in the chair beside his bed, reading aloud from a novel she had found in the hospital library. Something ridiculous about a pirate who fell in love with a duchess. Lucien didn't care about the story. He watched her lips move. Watched the way her brow furrowed when she encountered a particularly absurd plot twist. Watched the way lamplight caught the shadows beneath her eyes, still dark, still deep, but softening. She was healing. They both were. A soft knock at the door. Marco entered, and in his arms, Sophia. The child squirmed free before Marco could set her down, launching herself across the room with a ferocity that belied her small frame. She climbed onto the hospital bed with careful determination, settling herself against Lucien's uninjured side like she had done it 1,000 times. Her hand found his. Her head rested against his chest. And in a voice that was growing stronger every day, still quiet, still tentative, still fragile as new glass, she said, "I drew you something." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. A full sentence. Sophia's first full sentence in over 2 years. Lucien's throat tightened so painfully he couldn't speak for several seconds. "Show me," he finally managed. Sophia produced a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. A drawing. A family. 3 figures standing together beneath a bright yellow sun. A tall man with dark hair and a wolf tattoo. A woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. And a small girl between them, holding both their hands. Beneath the figures, in Sophia's careful, unsteady handwriting, "La mia famiglia." My family. Elena was crying. Lucien was not. But only because he had stopped breathing. He pulled Sophia closer, gently, mindful of his wounds, and pressed his lips to the top of her head. "Yes, Piccola," he whispered. "La tua famiglia." Always. That evening. After Sophia fell asleep curled between them on the hospital bed, small and warm and impossibly precious, Elena turned to Lucien. "What happens now?" He was quiet for a moment, his fingers absently stroking Sophia's hair. "Enzo's trial begins in 3 months. The prosecution has everything they need: Sophia's drawings, Valentina's recordings, Giuliana's testimony. The government minister connected to Ferrante's assassination has already been arrested." And the syndicate? I'm restructuring. He met her eyes. Moving away from the operations that, he paused, chose his words carefully, that created men like my brother. It will take years. It won't be clean. But it will be different. Different how? Legitimate. Or as close to legitimate as a Moretti can get. Elena studied his face. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything. His hand found hers across the sleeping child between them. I've spent my entire life building an empire, accumulating power, eliminating threats. And for what? For this. Elena gestured to the three of them, tangled together on a hospital bed, battered and exhausted and somehow, impossibly, whole. For us. Something moved across Lucien's face. Wonder. Disbelief. Gratitude so profound it looked like pain. For you, he corrected softly. Chapter 20. The Rebuilding. 2 months later. The Moretti estate felt different. Elena noticed it in small ways at first. The guards smiled more, the curtains were opened wider, the garden that had been ornamental and untouched was now scattered with Sophia's toys. Then she noticed it in larger ways. Lucien came home earlier, lingered at dinner longer, laughed. She hadn't known he could laugh. Not the cold, performative amusement he deployed in business settings, but genuine, surprised laughter that transformed his face and made him look 10 years younger. Sophia drew it out of him with startling regularity. The child had blossomed. Her speech returned in fragments, single words at first, then phrases, then whole sentences that tumbled out of her as if she were making up for 2 years of silence. She called Elena Mama. She called Lucien Papa. Neither of them corrected her. One morning, Elena was making breakfast, actually making it, in Lucien's absurdly enormous kitchen, because she had insisted on cooking their meals herself. "You have a private chef," Lucien pointed out from where he sat at the kitchen island, watching her with unconcealed fascination. "Your private chef puts truffle oil on everything." "Truffle oil is excellent." "Truffle oil does not belong on scrambled eggs." "It most certainly does." Sophia, perched on the counter with a glass of orange juice, looked between them with the specific delight of a child watching her parents bicker. "Mama's right," she said. Lucien pressed a hand to his chest in mock offense. "Betrayal." Sophia giggled. The sound filled the kitchen, bright and unexpected and so beautiful that Elena had to grip the counter to keep from crying. She met Lucien's eyes over Sophia's head. He was already watching her. Not with the cold, predatory intensity of the man who had caught her in a grocery store months ago. With warmth. With wonder. With the quiet, astonished gratitude of someone who had never expected to be happy. "What?" she said, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing." His voice was soft. "You're just standing in my kitchen, making eggs, arguing about truffle oil. And I've been alive for 46 years. And this is the best morning I've ever had." Elena's breath caught. She wanted to say something witty, something deflecting. Instead, she crossed the kitchen, cupped his face in her hands, and kissed him. Slow, tender, full of every word they hadn't said yet. When she pulled back, Sophia was watching them with enormous, delighted eyes. "Does this mean I can have a puppy?" she asked. Lucien and Elena answered simultaneously. "No." "Yes." They looked at each other. "We'll discuss it," Elena said firmly. That afternoon, a man came to the estate. Young, handsome, charming. He was the new attorney assigned to coordinate Enzo's trial, a rising star in the prosecutor's office named Dario Conti, with bright eyes and an easy smile and a habit of touching Elena's arm when he spoke to her. Lucien noticed immediately. He said nothing, did nothing. But something shifted behind his eyes, something dark and possessive and absolutely lethal. Elena was in the garden, discussing legal timelines with Dario, when she glanced toward the house and saw Lucien watching from the study window. His face was expressionless. His body was still. But his hand, resting on the windowsill, was clenched into a fist so tight that the tendons stood out like cables. The black wolf tattoo seemed to pulse against his skin. Elena excused herself from the conversation and went inside. She found Lucien at his desk, pretending to read documents. "He's an attorney," she said. "I'm aware. He's here about the trial. I'm aware of that as well. He's not a threat." Lucien didn't look up. "I didn't say he was." Elena leaned against the doorframe. "You're jealous." "I am not jealous. I am observing. There is a difference." "Lucien." He looked up. His expression was carefully neutral. But his eyes were burning. "He touches your arm when he talks to you," Lucien said quietly. "It's a professional gesture. It's excessive. You're being ridiculous." "I am being observant." He set down his pen. "He looked at you 4 times during your conversation. 3 of those times his eyes dropped below your face. And when you laughed at something he said, I was being polite." His pupils dilated. Elena stared at him. "Did you just measure his pupils?" "I notice things." His voice was flat. "It's what I do." Elena should have been annoyed. Should have been frustrated by this absurd display of possessive observation. Instead, something warm and entirely inappropriate bloomed in her chest. She crossed the room slowly, sat on the edge of his desk, looked down at him with an expression that was half exasperation, half affection. "Lucien Moretti." "Yes. I shot a man for you." He blinked. "I held your hand while you bled on a dock. I stayed by your bed for 5 days while you were unconscious. I chose you, not because I had to, not because you saved me, but because you are the most infuriating, complicated, unexpectedly gentle man I have ever met." She leaned closer. "An attorney with nice hair is not going to change that." Lucien was quiet for a moment. Then, very slowly, the tension in his jaw eased. "He doesn't have nice hair." "He has very nice hair." "Elena, I'm just stating facts." She smiled. "I notice things too." His hand came up, fingers threading through her hair, pulling her closer until their foreheads touched. "You're infuriating," he murmured. "You love it." His answer was a kiss, slow and deep and possessive in the most tender way imaginable. When they broke apart, Elena noticed that Dario Conti had been quietly escorted off the property by 4 very large men. She decided not to mention it. Chapter 21. The Trial. 3 months later. The trial of Enzo Moretti dominated Italian news for weeks. Elena testified. Her voice was steady, her account detailed, her composure unshakable, even when the defense attorney implied she had fabricated her story for financial gain. "I lived in a car for 3 years, Elena said calmly. "I ate 1 meal a day when I could afford it. I gave up my medical career, my identity, my future. For money." She shook her head. "I did it because a dying woman put her child in my arms and begged me to keep her safe." The courtroom was silent. Sophia's testimony was presented through her drawings, projected onto screens, explained by child psychologists, corroborated by forensic evidence. The jury saw everything. The faces Sophia had memorized. The room where the conspiracy was planned. The eagle pin on a government minister's lapel. The twisted wolf tattoo on Enzo's wrist, a mockery of his brother's mark. Lucien testified last. He walked into the courtroom the way he walked into every room, silent, commanding, inevitable. He wore a dark suit. His black wolf tattoo was visible at his wrist when he raised his hand to be sworn in. He looked at his brother. Enzo stared back from the defendant's table, diminished now, the charm stripped away, the arrogance replaced by something hollow and desperate. They had the same eyes, the same jaw, the same father's ghost hovering between them. "Mr. Moretti," the prosecutor began, "can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" Lucien was quiet for a long moment. "He is my brother," he said finally. "He is also the man who murdered my informant, kidnapped a child, and attempted to kill me." His voice didn't waver. "I loved him. I suspect I always will. And I will never forgive him." The courtroom was silent. Enzo's eyes glistened. But Lucien had already looked away. The verdict came on a Tuesday. Guilty. On all counts. Life imprisonment without parole. Elena sat in the gallery with Sophia on her lap and watched Enzo Moretti be led away in handcuffs. She felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Only exhaustion. And a quiet, bone-deep certainty that it was finally over. Outside the courthouse, Lucien was waiting by the car. He leaned against the black sedan, hands in his pockets, wolf tattoo catching the afternoon sun. His face was unreadable. But when Sophia ran toward him, arms outstretched, face bright with the uncomplicated joy of a child who knows she is loved, something cracked open. He caught her, lifted her, held her against his chest with the fierce, trembling tenderness of a man who had come so close to losing everything. Elena reached them a moment later. Lucien's free arm wrapped around her, pulling her close, pressing his face into her hair. They stood like that, the three of them, tangled together on a courthouse sidewalk, surrounded by cameras and chaos and the detritus of a nightmare that was finally ending. "Take us home," Elena whispered. Lucien tightened his hold. Always. Chapter 22. The Question. 6 months later. Summer in Naples. The estate was transformed. Elena had planted flowers in the garden. Wildflowers, not the manicured roses of Lucien's formal landscaping. They grew in chaotic profusion, spilling over pathways, climbing walls, filling the air with color and fragrance. Sophia had a dog. A rescued greyhound named Luna who followed the child everywhere with patient devotion. Lucien pretended to be irritated by the dog. But Elena had caught him asleep on the library sofa with Luna curled on his chest, both of them snoring. She had taken a photo. She looked at it often. One evening, Elena was sitting on the balcony, watching the sunset paint Naples in shades of gold and amber, when she heard Lucien's footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. She knew his footsteps the way she knew her own heartbeat. "Sophia's asleep," she said. "I know. I checked." He stepped beside her, leaning against the railing. "Twice. You always check twice. She's my daughter. Of course I checked twice." The word landed softly between them. Daughter. He had never formally. "Lucien. I want to make it official." He turned to face her. His expression was more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. The armor gone, the walls down, nothing left but the raw, terrified honesty of a man in love. The adoption. "Sophia." Elena's breath caught. "I've spoken to the lawyers. With Valentina's death and the circumstances of Sophia's care, it's possible to formalize guardianship. But I want more than guardianship." He swallowed. "I want her to be mine. Ours. Legally. Permanently. Lucien. I know what I am. I know what I've done. I know I'm not the father she deserves." His voice cracked. "But I love her. She is my daughter in every way that matters. And I want the world to know it." Elena reached for his hand. "She already knows. I want it on paper." His fingers laced through hers. "I want it real." Elena studied his face, the sharp angles, the tired eyes, the jaw that had learned to soften, the mouth that had learned to smile. "Yes," she said. His exhale was shaky. "But," Elena added, and something in her voice made him stiffen, "there's something else I need from you first." "Anything." "That night. On the dock. When you thought you were going to die." She stepped closer. "You told me to run. To build a life. To love again. I remember. I need you to understand something." Her hand came up to cup his face. "There is no again. There's no other life. No other love. There's only this. Only us." His eyes searched hers. "Elena." "I spent 5 years surviving. Running. Hiding. I told myself that survival was enough. That I didn't need anything else." Her thumb traced his cheekbone. "But you taught me that surviving isn't living. And I'm done surviving, Lucian." She held his gaze. "I want to live. With me. With you. With Sophia. With this ridiculous dog and this enormous house and your truffle oil addiction." She smiled through tears. "With all of it." Lucian closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were bright. Luminous, filled with something she had never seen before. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated, terrifying joy. He reached into his jacket pocket, produced a small velvet box. Elena's heart stopped. "I was going to wait," he said, voice rough. "I had a plan. Dinner. Candles. Music. Something worthy of you. I don't need worthy of me." Her voice was shaking. "I just need you." He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple. Elegant. A single diamond set in a band of dark metal, black gold, she realized, engraved with a tiny wolf on the inner surface. Elena Rossi. His voice was barely a whisper. "Will you let me spend the rest of my life protecting you? Annoying you? Putting truffle oil on your eggs?" She laughed. It came out broken and beautiful and wet with tears. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, because of course it did. He had measured her finger while she slept 3 months ago, a fact he would confess to later, to her profound exasperation and secret delight. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of everything they had survived to reach this moment. And from inside the house a small voice called, "Are you getting married? Can Luna be the flower dog?" They broke apart, laughing. "Were you spying?" Elena called back. Sophia appeared in the doorway, Luna at her heels, a grin stretching across her face, bright and unafraid and so achingly beautiful that Elena's heart physically hurt. "I want to be the flower girl," Sophia announced. "And Luna can carry the rings." Lucian crouched down and opened his arms. Sophia ran into them. "You can be anything you want, Piccola." His voice was thick. "Anything at all." Chapter 23. The Wedding. 3 months later. Autumn in Naples. The ceremony was held in the estate's garden, Elena's garden, wild and chaotic and perfect. There were no cameras, no press, no spectacle, just family. The real kind. Marco stood as Lucian's best man, looking uncomfortable in a suit and deeply, visibly moved. Juliana, who had become Elena's unexpected friend during the trial, served as maid of honor. Dr. Falcone sat in the front row, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief and pretending it was allergies. Alessandro managed the security perimeter and cried openly. And Sophia. Sophia walked down the aisle ahead of Elena, scattering wildflower petals with intense concentration, Luna trotting beside her with a small pillow tied to her collar bearing 2 simple gold bands. She wore a white dress with a ribbon in her hair. She was smiling. Really, truly smiling. And when she reached the end of the aisle, She looked at Lucien, who was already watching her, and said, clearly and confidently, "I brought your bride, Papa." Lucien's composure, the legendary ironclad composure that had survived decades of violence and betrayal and loss, cracked completely. He knelt down, gathered his daughter in his arms, and held her while tears streaked silently down his face. Elena appeared at the end of the aisle. She wore a simple white dress. No veil, no train, just Elena. Lucien stood, set Sophia gently on her feet, and looked at the woman who had changed everything. She was radiant, not because of the dress or the setting or the golden autumn light, but because she was looking at him the way no one had ever looked at him, like he was good, like he was enough, like he was home. Elena walked toward him, and with every step the last 5 years fell away, the running, the hunger, the fear, the loneliness. She reached him, took his hands, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The officiant began the ceremony, but the words were secondary, background music to the conversation happening in silence between two people who had found each other in the most impossible circumstances. "Do you, Lucien Moretti, take Elena Rossi?" "Yes." The officiant blinked. "I haven't finished." "Yes." "To everything. For the rest of my life." "Yes." Quiet laughter rippled through the small gathering. Elena's eyes sparkled. "And do you, Elena Rossi?" "Yes." She squeezed his hands. "To all of it. The danger and the truffle oil and the overprotective surveillance." "I don't. You measured my finger while I slept. That was romantic. It was creepy. It was efficient and romantic." More laughter. Sophia, standing between them, tugged on Lucien's jacket. "You're supposed to kiss now." Lucien looked at his daughter, at his wife, at the family he had never expected to have. "Yes, Piccola," he said softly. "I am." He kissed Elena as the garden erupted in applause. Soft, reverent, a promise sealed before everyone who mattered. And somewhere in the chaos of petals and laughter and the warm Naples wind, a little girl who had once been silent held her father's hand and smiled. Epilogue. 1 year later. The Moretti estate. Sunday morning. Elena woke to the sound of laughter. She lay still for a moment, disoriented, before the warmth of the bed and the familiarity of the room settled around her like a blanket. Home. The word still felt new, still felt precious. She rose, pulled on a robe, and followed the sound of chaos downstairs. In the kitchen, she found Sophia standing on a step stool, covered in flour, conducting a baking operation with the seriousness of a military commander. Luna lying beneath the table, eating something she definitely shouldn't be eating. And Lucien Moretti, the Black Wolf of Naples, the most feared man in southern Italy, standing at the counter in a white T-shirt and sweatpants, flour in his hair, an apron tied around his waist, attempting to follow a 7-year-old's instructions for chocolate cake. "More sugar, Papa." "There is already an alarming amount of sugar." "More." "Sophia, this cake will be inedible." "That's what Mama said about your risotto, and everyone ate it." "Everyone ate it because I am terrifying." "Everyone ate it because Mama made them." Lucien looked up and caught Elena watching from the doorway. His face softened. He always softened now, not the way he softened before, reluctantly, painfully, like armor being pried apart. Now it was natural, effortless, the face of a man who had learned that vulnerability was not weakness, that love was not a liability, that family was not something you controlled. It was something you chose, every single day. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." Elena crossed the kitchen and kissed him, tasting sugar and coffee and the particular sweetness of a man who was exactly where he wanted to be. You have flour in your eyebrows. I'm aware. You look ridiculous. I'm aware of that too. His hand found the small of her back, that familiar grounding touch that meant I'm here, I love you, you are mine. Sophia is teaching me to bake. I can see that. Elena turned to her daughter. How's he doing? Sophia considered. He needs supervision. He certainly does. Lucien looked between his wife and his daughter with an expression of exaggerated betrayal. I run an empire. You ran an empire, Elena corrected. Now you run a household. The skill sets are different. I am a brilliant strategist. You burned toast yesterday. Sophia giggled. Luna barked. And Lucien smiled. Not the cold, calculated smile he gave the world. Not the rare, reluctant half-smile Elena had spent months coaxing from him. A real smile. Full, open, joyful. The smile of a man who had spent 46 years building walls and found something worth tearing them down for. Later that morning, Elena sat in the garden while Sophia played with Luna in the wildflowers. Lucien settled beside her on the bench, his hand finding hers with the automatic certainty of long practice. I want to tell you something, he said. That sounds ominous. It's not. He paused. Or maybe it is. I'm not sure. Elena turned to look at him. His expression was serious but not worried. Something else. Something she was still learning to read. Elena. Yes. I think. He stopped. Started again. The doctor confirmed it this morning. Elena went very still. Confirmed what? Lucien looked at her. His eyes were bright. Terrified. Hopeful. You're pregnant. The world stopped. Started again. Shifted on its axis and rearranged itself into something new. How? The appointment last week. Dr. Falcone ran additional tests. He called this morning. Lucien's grip on her hand tightened. 8 weeks. Elena stared at him. At this man, this complicated, dangerous, impossibly gentle man, who had caught her when she fell in a grocery store and never let go. A baby, she whispered. A baby. His voice cracked on the word. Our baby. She pressed her free hand to her stomach. Felt nothing yet, but felt everything. Are you scared? She asked. Terrified. Me too. But I was terrified of Sophia, and of you, and of love. He brought her hand to his lips. And those are the best things that ever happened to me. Elena's vision blurred. She reached for him, and he pulled her close, carefully, tenderly, the way he did everything now. Lucien. Yes. If it's a boy. No wolf tattoos until he's 18. She laughed, a sound that rang across the garden and made Sophia look up, curious and delighted. Mama. Papa. What's funny? Elena looked at Lucien. He looked at her. Together, they said, Come here, Piccola. We have something to tell you. Sophia ran toward them, all flying hair and muddy knees and the unbridled joy of a child who had learned, at last, that the world could be safe. She climbed onto the bench between them. Luna followed, resting her head on Sophia's lap. And in that garden, wild and imperfect and bursting with life, a family sat together in the Naples sunlight. Not because they shared blood, but because they had chosen each other. Through darkness and danger and sacrifice. Through silence and fear and the long, slow miracle of trust. Through love, messy, fierce, terrifying, world-altering love. The Black Wolf of Naples had found his pack, and he would protect them with everything he had, everything he was, everything he would ever be. On the inner surface of his wedding ring, engraved in tiny letters, were the words, Il lupo ti proteggerà. The wolf will protect you. Valentina's promise. Lucien's vow. And Elena's truth. Forever.